Okay, amazing. Welcome to Business Book Club, reading an absolute classic here, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Hello, Jared, and a big thank you for being my guest to chat through the book with me this month. And thank you to everybody for joining. We're going to move kind of fast today because there is so much good stuff in this book. Before we get started, Jared, would you mind just giving the folks a quick intro? I'm assuming everybody here knows you, but just in case.
But I just want to say, like, this room right here is pretty spectacular. Anybody could lead this book club today. I'm just the lucky one. Thank you for having me, Leslie, and for being a part of this. This is so cool. So I'm Jared. I'm co-founder of a community called Ref Genius. Our mission is our mission is to create trusted spaces for curious revenue professionals who are collaborating on the future of B2B go-to-market. Habit number 4 rings true. Letting everyone win. And I don't want to go too tangential, but that probably hits home as to the way things should be of late, even if they aren't.
I love it. I love it. Yes, trusted spaces, absolutely, and that's definitely what this is. I know a few of you have joined before, and while I'm sort of having the conversation with Jared, this is still an open and interactive and collaborative space. So please use the chat. Feel free to come off mute and share your insights and share your stories. Jared is just here to create some structure, help guide the conversation so we get those extra golden nuggets. Let's start with character ethic versus personality ethic and the inside out approach, which is sort of the prequel to the book before Stephen gets into the 7 habits. He says that the inside out approach means that making and keeping promises to ourselves precedes making and keeping promises to others. And it means that it is futile to put personality ahead of character. And it's futile to try to improve relationships with others before improving ourselves. I think that is profound. I frankly did not expect to like this book as much as I did. I had never read it before, and I'm like, after reading it, I'm like pretty obsessed. I'm probably going to go back and read it a second time. But I'd love to hear, Jared, like, you have a lot of competing priorities, right? You're building this community. I know you spend a lot of time learning. Obviously, you have a relationship that you are invested in. How do you balance all of those priorities with still emphasizing that self-work and that self-growth, that inside out approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when you've read or believe in a concept or a book, and then you have it come again, it kind of hits harder and you lean in harder to what you're reading. And that certainly happened here. So how do I balance it? There's a saying, like, let's get spiritual with it, right? Because that is essentially what this is. You need to love yourself before you could truly love others. And I think there's some similarities here, like with both. And it just gets to the root, man. Like I was anxious last night. I was anxious this morning. I'm not the only one. Times are hard out there. And for a plethora of reasons. What's going to, I want to be careful with using the word fix. What's going to help me integrate that is going internally, not externally. And doing that will have a profound impact on how I'm able to show up for myself and others, and how I'm going to be able to execute the work at hand. If you just try to like do all the surface level stuff without, and I'm saying inward is the deep work, you're going to be being like a dog chasing its tail and not really like overcoming anything. And not feeling good. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're spot on. And Stephen talks about that a lot in the book, that if you don't have those inward habits, 1, 2, and 3 down pat, it's going to be pretty difficult, even pointless, for you to work on those outward habits, because to your point, you have to, love yourself before you can, really love others. He has a quote on page 61 that says, "Be patient with yourself. Self-growth is tender, it's holy ground, and there is no greater investment." Pretty
and it's
powerful stuff.
continuous. It's
Yeah.
continuous.
And it's continuous. Habit 7, right? Renewal and sharpening the saw. And I think I absolutely agree with what you said, Jared. And especially like the last 18 months for me have been really committed to self-work that I think was always sort of there, but I constantly made excuses about, oh, I'm so busy and I have to prioritize this, and maybe a little bit of that addiction to urgency, that it was important, but always got pushed down the list. And with last 18 months, I joke, I think, Lori, we were talking about this last month at dinner, that even though I'm not doing like work I get paid for, it is some of the hardest work I have ever done. Hard, but rewarding. So I'd actually love to hear from the group real quick before we dig into effective habits. Stephen talks about ineffective habits, and he says the top 7 are being reactive, not planning ahead or setting goals, having an urgency addiction, thinking in those win-loss terms, listening to reply but not to understand, being an island and burning yourself out. And I would bet that every single person just heard one, that they're like, oh yeah, that's me. So I'd love to hear from the group, and you're welcome to drop a comment if you don't want to come off mute, but like, what is your, after reading this book or the Cliff Notes or the audiobook or whatever you did, what is your one thing that you're like, that is a habit that I really want to prioritize improving on as I go forward? For me, it's still burning out. Like, even with 18 months post-corporate America, working on recovering from burnout, like that is something that I still, like, I feel myself just like, I should take on another project. I should do something else. Like, I should book more meetings. I should just be busier for the sake of busyness, which is not it. What did we hear? Jared said, number 1. Yeah.
That's number 1, being reactive.
Being reactive. Yeah.
It happens in real time. And it's your fears in real time. Like, you'll notice yourself, like 2 people could have the same blip happen, and one could respond and one could react. And that's dealing with their own stuff. It to me, it's a continuation of the first part of this conversation, going inwardly.
Yeah.
I mean, it all is, but that one especially.
I see the GOAT, Mike Simons, has also joined us, and he said that the burnout is a big one for him as well, allowing himself to be consumed with busyness. I feel like head nods, that's like a pretty common woe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with the reactivity, but I think to some extent I resonate with all of these, like the win-loss, black and white thinking. But I think reactivity is kind of almost like a root of a lot of them too, like reactivity, I think, holds the urgency addiction, the black and white thinking, because you get into that fear mindset. And for me, over this last year in my MBA program, we've been learning, like, when we have that reactivity, like, where are we in our developmental stages? Like, where are we hearkening back to? What fears are being tapped into? And then how do you provide for that fear in the moment so that reactivity doesn't control your response? And it's pretty wild, like, how it works out. But yeah, it's really interesting.
That's fascinating, Britta. And it immediately brings so many of the stories that were told in the book to mind, where it was like the reaction. And if immediately afterwards he regretted the reaction and wanted to handle it a different way, but it was brought on by so many layers of yeah, that's fascinating. Lori says the urgency addiction. Yeah, we're going to have a little exercise on the urgency addiction here in a second. That's great. Thank you.
For me
Just
too,
to-
it's like a definite hand in hand between urgency or addiction to urgency and burnout. Because I find myself needing that urgency to motivate myself to get all of these different things done, and then not realizing that I am so close to burnout that I end up being forced to take a break.
Yeah. I feel that, but like burning out so hard that the only way to come back from burnout is your body and your mind forcing you to stop. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Maren. Yeah.
Leslie,
Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead. Go on.
You mentioned about the corporate America. I had an opportunity to work for the American conglomerate called Xerox many years back, and then started in their customer services side of things, and then moved to sales. What I've realized in the early part of my career, there was almost like a falling in love with the urgency, because people were constantly driving that, well, you need to get this done within the next half an hour. Whether it's just a customer call or any of those situations. So it came to a point where we were at the ground floor level, and we decided that many of these decisions that we kind of get trusted down upon, we could self-empower ourselves and take some of those decision-making process a little bit, easing out our life. We were, almost 8 hours a day outside in the field, talking to customers and all of that. So that really taught me a lesson. And, I got this book long time back, though it's a different looking book, but yeah, it's kind of change your paradigm. And I think paradigm shift is a big word there. So we'll talk about it later. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything around that habit 3, I think it is about time management and the urgency addiction that then leads to this feeling of tricking our brains into a constant state of hyperactivity and the dopamine hits that come from it. And then we go to burnout. Like it absolutely layers. And I think you're completely right, Neil, that with that paradigm shift, we can realize that is not necessarily how we want to operate or how we want to define our lives. So one of the things that I really loved about the copy that I have, which is the 30-year anniversary copy, is that it has updates from his son in them. Did anybody else get that copy? No? Okay, it's super cool. It just it's like updated insights. And so he'll share maybe parts of it that have been validated by data now, like 35 years later. And I made a note on page 68 for what Stephen was talking about in habit 1. And I was like, oh, wow, this sounds like thinking of paradigm shift. I was like, this sounds a lot like fixed fee growth mindset. And I love Carol Dweck. Like I do a whole growth mindset training as part of my training series. I think she is so wise. And then in Sean Covey's summary of updated insights of that chapter, he talks about how what his dad was saying 30 years earlier has now been deeply validated by data from people like Carol. And he also mentions Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, which is our December read. So it's like all the webs coming together there. And like thinking about that paradigm shift, Stephen and others, obviously, like Carol and Angela talk a lot about how like the knowledge and the skill and the desire, like the ability to choose our attitude and choose the way we react, that is what's in our control. And that I think at one point he says like that's the opposite of being excuse happy. And we all know those people, like we've had them as friends, family members, colleagues that are excuse happy. But I'd love to hear, Jared, because you are somebody that is responsible to your employees, responsible to your community, responsible to the sponsors that are giving you money to have, like you have responsibilities to a lot of different folks. And I mean, I think that it like we can't be all things to all people. We can't always get it right, always please all people. So how do you avoid being excuse happy or holding yourself accountable when you feel that desire to slip into the habit of blaming external forces if things aren't so ideal.
There are no external forces. That shit has to be cut by the next day. Otherwise, it's not serving me at all.
Mm,
There is no winning in the excuse battle when you're a founder. Like, the other option is to go out of business.
yeah.
So like, is that winning? Like, it's all good. Like, you could sit on your ego and say, I didn't really force the company to go out and have no company. Like, I don't care about the reason. It either happens or it doesn't. And showing up for the people of the community is everything. And I was talking earlier to a friend who's a wonderful community leader, and we were talking about the difficulties in community in particular, because and you know, we have as much opportunity for excuses as anything, because you have community members, and if you're using in a business model, like at often different, like especially the sponsorship business model. So like, are you going to focus too much on the community members and the sponsorship goes out, or the sponsorship and the community members stop being there? It's a delicate balance. Even with that ability to have it, it's our responsibility to figure it out, or be okay with it.
Yeah, as a founder, you are not a cog in the wheel. Like, everything really comes back to you. So it makes sense that like it's really an environment that does not allow for excuses if you want your company to continue to exist.
Yeah, I mean, like, who am I going to talk to, myself or my team?
Right.
Like, that's not going to make them feel like warm and fuzzy. What are they going to say? You're right, Jared. Like, let's
Right.
just pack it up.
Yeah, true. Okay, I'd like to do another little exercise because there is a part, I think it's in habit 2, where Stephen talks about developing a personal mission statement. And it immediately reminded me and got me excited about a concept that I've used for the past like 3 or 4 years that I've called the philosophy of my ambition. Like, it was like doing this exercise initially, which I think I heard it on a podcast. I don't know where I heard it, so I can't give credit, but I didn't make it up. But it is what kind of started me down this like domino path of realizing that tracking towards CRO, like, it wasn't doing it. It wasn't it for me, and I needed to make some different choices. So I thought it'd be fun to just take like 60 seconds. The exercise in the book is a very long, very in-depth exercise. So certainly use this as your starting point and then go back and go deeper. But I thought it would be fun to just come up with maybe 2 or 3 sentences, like 2 or 3 bullet points that are our guiding light. Like, what is the philosophy of our ambition? What is our personal mission statement? So like, obviously I realize that the things like CRO and title and wealth that I thought were my mission, my vision, they weren't. And I replaced those with things like freedom and adventure and time with family. So I'd love if everybody just took 60 seconds here. And if you feel comfortable dropping any of the things that you come up with in the chat, or you want to come off mute and share them, I would love to hear them. But while you are all thinking of maybe 2 or 3 bullet points of the philosophy of your life's ambition, Jared, what immediately pops to mind for you?
So a couple of things as I'm typing over here. Oh man. You know, I've said in the past, like, at the end of this, I hope to have helped somebody, but like, or hope that people remember me as helpful, I should say. But also something that's stuck in my mind, like, I have a responsibility to maximize my ambition, whatever that is, that could evolve. And that doesn't have to be professionally. If my ambition is to travel, that's that. If my ambition and you know, post Rev Genius is to start a movie production company, it might be. We'll figure that out. It's my responsibility to take that to the end. And how I look at that is it could evolve, it could change, but I need to fully explore what I truly want to fully explore. So like to get to that point, peeling away fears and stuff and just going for it and not caring.
Ooh, so like the philosophy of your ambition is giving yourself like the space and the permission and the encouragement to follow your whims, your dreams, your desires.
Yeah, to do what I truly want. I've realized so much in my
Yeah.
life, and I'll steal like some words from Jim Carrey, like how his dad could have been the best comedian in the world, but practicality set in, and he was an accountant until one day he wasn't, and they lived on their front yard, out of a car or out of a cousin's front yard, and he's like, he could have been the best thing, and then he came to the conclusion, like, if it's this easy to fail at doing something you don't want to do, right? And we're watching right now in a very difficult economic climate in the technology world, people failing at what maybe they don't want to do. Like, you might as well try to succeed at something you do. Anyway.
No, it's good. There's a show on the Hallmark Channel. I'm really telling on myself right now. I am a sucker for the Hallmark Channel, particularly Hallmark murder mystery movies. Like
Lifetime murder mysteries.
No, not Lifetime. I don't like it has to be the Hallmark ones, but there's a popular series called The Good Witch. And it's so funny because the episode that I watched last night is my wind down show. The guy was an accountant and he was having all these like really terrible physical symptoms, and the doctor couldn't get to the bottom of it. And then it finally was stressed because he actually hated his job as an accountant. And, the end of the story was that he reignited his passion for photography and quit his accounting job to follow his passion for photography. And then all of his physical ailments suddenly went away. So, that is like your life is a Hallmark movie.
I would think an A24 movie, but yes. If you know A24.
So when you follow your ambition to be in film, you're not going to make Hallmark movies. Is this what I'm hearing?
So I surprisingly like Lifetime movies. I didn't realize how much I did because it doesn't sound like anything. They have some pretty good, cheesy, slightly cheesy. There's like a commonality with all of them. Horror movies. My partner and her friends watch it when they're not around me, and I get jealous.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Okay, we have some great stuff coming into the chat here. From Mike. A mission to help people do the things they want to do better and faster, who are willing to help themselves. Yeah, I love that.
So good.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that, Mike. Lori, to support others in positive ways, be a great family member, friend, keeper of stories that matter. Lori, and help improve the B2B sales world. Lori, that is why you are the GOAT.
So good.
No, that made me emotional. That's so good. Anybody else want to pop off mute and share what they came up with? You don't have to.
I'm happy I shared mine first. It's by far the worst.
Do it.
Everybody else is so great.
Lori's just dropping out, like dropping the knowledge. Yeah,
I'll say that it's my the philosophy of my ambition is to engage deeply with others in the world around me, to create a world that works for everyone. And also part of the philosophy of my ambition involves growing wealthy, not just monetarily, but wealthy in relationships and in network through being more and more authentically myself.
Oof. That's a good one. Read the middle one again. I really like that.
To engage deeply with others in the world around me. And then shoot, it was
like to make the world accessible for everyone, or make
to make a world that works for everyone. Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
I'm particularly passionate about it because I have dyslexia and ADHD. And I'm doing some really interesting research on ways we can improve the world for people like me. So
what is your you said MBA is what you're pursuing, right? What is your focus for your MBA?
Social emotional intelligence.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and I'm going to have my life coaching certificate at the end of this too as a part of that. So it's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that is very, very cool. A welcome to Mike, and then let's move to habit 3. Man, habit 3, planning and goal setting. This is my shit. I love planning and goal setting. I would say that that is like the best ND part of me, that it comes easily to me to plan and to goal set. Maybe it's actually a coping mechanism from being undiagnosed for like most of my life and having to figure it out on my own, but now I'm really good at it. So in habit 3, Stephen Covey goes deep on creating habits, really on how to plan, on how to goal set, and then how to stick with it. He shares that empowerment comes from the decisions we make every day, the little decisions, the nitty gritty stuff. And we've explored this topic in book club for the past couple of years with books like Atomic Habit. And a few months ago, we did the motivation myth. The urgent versus important framework is something that I've used, like since maybe 2009 as a time management technique, when I was in a job where I was a hiring manager, an IC, and I was managing a team of 9 direct reports, and was like, well, I've really got to figure out how to manage my time better, or else I'm going to lose my mind. And I still use it today. I love it. Jared, how do you keep showing up to achieve those small goals, those mini milestones? How do you keep showing up to achieve those mini milestone goals day after day without getting, distracted, dissuaded, discouraged, whatever it is?
For me, it's a lot harder. I'm pretty sure I've undiagnosed ADHD. Fairly certain. So, having others help me with that. Having multiple goals, one North Star, but like multiple things to hit is tough. How do I keep showing up? It's the desire for the community to succeed. And I'm getting a little better every day.
So
But we haven't even said
really,
Q3 numbers yet. And we should have
right.
like 2 weeks ago.
So it sounds like, maybe
It took me about 2 years to figure out OKRs. If you know, like things that are like purely aligned. It's a process.
Yeah. At the top of the hour, I know we're talking about like a habit that we want to invest in ourselves to continue to grow in. And it sounds like this piece, this like showing up consistently day after day, is something that you have been working on.
So it's something. So I'm good at showing up day after day. It's the goal setting. Showing up for the right thing. I'm seeing Britta shake her head like the showing up part. That's easy. or easier. It's showing up with the right focus to move the needle. So that little nuance, like I love showing up for people, but like, is my time best spent spending 6 hours with community members, or when you run a free community, or is it best spent the other way? That's what I could use improvement on.
Yeah, that is literally why I started using those urgent v important quadrants. I'm going to tell you what page they're on. I don't know. They're like in the late 190s maybe, because there were a lot of things that I was doing that felt important, and I was dedicating way too much time to them. But I really, really geek out on this stuff. And so the way I set my business goals is that I have one key result area, my number one business goal. So like right now for me as a business owner, my number one business goal, my key result area is to hit my annual number, which is 231,000 in revenue. And then when I set my smaller goals, they have to align to achieving my KRA. And then when I am looking at my daily activities, so I'm going to break them down into mini goals, right? Like I need to talk to 20 people this quarter to stay, you know, to get enough meetings, to get enough opportunities to blah, 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 blah. And so when I think about my daily activities, it's simple stuff though, like on a day-to-day basis, I need to leave 10 meaningful comments on LinkedIn posts. On a weekly basis, I need to have time in my calendar with at least 3 people who could be an opportunity or refer me to an opportunity. So it's like those smaller things that are a little bit more achievable, a little bit more within my control. I mean, leaving 10 comments is like totally in my control. I either do it or I don't do it. I only have myself to blame. But that really, really, really helped me look at my urgent and be important quadrants to be like, it's important. I mean, like connecting with people generally is something we'd all agree is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is it important in the context of me achieving my key result area? If it isn't, then it actually isn't important in this context. So I need to move it to a different quadrant and spend less time on it. And that is something that I did this year by creating a new calendar link only for Coffee Connects so that they max out at 4 hours a week. Instead of like some weeks I was having 10 hours of Coffee Connects, right? So I'm not removing it, but I'm changing the amount of time I'm willing to dedicate it. Or like, Britta, you know this firsthand. Now I only record pods 2 days or 2 days a month. So I cluster that activity, and it's not because it's not important, it is. But my like showing up on a pod to achieving my revenue goal pipeline, it's a Jeremy Bearimy. Like it is not a meet with somebody, open and off, close the deal. So I'm very cognizant of how I spend time. So I like love the urgent be important framework. Okay, so now that we have gone down my rabbit hole, I want to do another interactive activity about urgency addiction. Who wants to just feel called out? Because I sure did. Okay, everybody needs to be able to track their numbers. So you either need to be able to like write down your score or add your score up on a calculator or something like that. So I'm just going to give you 2 seconds. And then I am going to read through a series of questions. And if your answer to the question is never, that's a 0. Sometimes is a 2, and then always is a 4. So on a scale of 0 to 4, 0 is never, always is 4. We're good on that? Okay, question 1. I seem to do my best work when I'm under pressure. So you can give yourself a 0 to a 4, 0 being never, 4 being always. 2, I often blame the rush and press of external things for my failure to spend deep introspective time with myself. 3, I'm often frustrated by the slowness of people and things around me. I hate to wait or stand in line. I had to give myself a 4 on that for reference. It was a hard and immediate 4 for me.
I feel like I've evolved at some of these.
Some of them I was like, wow, Leslie, you're a different and better person. And on that one, I was like, no, slow walkers, like get them up, get them away from me. Yeah. Okay, question 4. I feel guilty when I take time off work. 0 being never, 4 being always. I always seem to be rushing between places and events. Question 6, I frequently find myself pushing people away so that I can finish a project. I feel anxious when I'm out of touch with the office for more than a few minutes. I'm often preoccupied with one thing when I'm doing something else. Okay, halfway through. Question 9, I'm at my best when I'm handling a crisis situation. The adrenaline rush from a new crisis seems more satisfying to me than the steady accomplishment of long-term results. I often give up quality time with important people in my life to handle crisis. 12. I assume people will naturally understand if I have to disappoint them or let things go in order to handle crisis. Okay, lucky number 13. I rely on solving some crises to give my day a sense of meaning and purpose. 14, I often eat lunch or other meals while I work. That was also a hard 4 for me. Okay, last 2 questions here. 15, I keep thinking that someday I'll be able to do what I really want. Last question here. Accomplishing a lot of tasks makes me feel like I've been really productive. Okay, now tally up your score and drop your total in the chat. Ellie, hello, welcome. You just missed an urgency addiction quiz. You got off the hook.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So tally up your score, drop it in the chat. I will start. Mine was a 35. Those 4s really added some 4s in there. Mike's like, I'm easy breezy over here. 38, 39. Okay, so we're all coming in pretty close so far. Mike, you're just like, I'll hit the links if I need to unwind. My husband was so excited when you sent those messages that he was like, oh, I saw some deer on the course last week. I got to text him back to Mike so you can see the deer on the course. So those are coming your way. 28, Jared. All right, you're down there with Mike.
Done a lot of meditation.
Used to be in the 30s, now 14. Get it, Lori, leading by example
that.
there.
That's so
Yeah.
good.
Okay. So 42, Britta. Well, I appreciate your honesty. Okay, so low urgency mindset is 0 to 25. So only Lori is over there in the low urgency mindset. Mike, you just missed it though. Strong urgency mindset is 26 to 45. Urgency addiction is anything 46 or above. But I have to say, team, immediately after this, it says if you're like most, you either have an urgency addiction or you're on the verge of developing one. And I actually don't feel like that applies to this group. But maybe it's because we're also a group of people that hold time in our days for things like book club discussions on how to be more effective. Lori, would you mind popping off? I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but moving from 30s down to 14 is impressive. Do you have any hot tips for us?
You didn't read the first 2 words. I'm old. I'm older
Wise,
than
Lori, you're wise.
everyone here. I read the first version of Stephen Covey's book. I've met him. I was a Franklin Covey facilitator for a number of years, and I taught What Matters Most course, where people were often in tears when we showed movie clips about, the people that aren't spending time with their family and they're all wrapped up in work. So I've had a lot of years to kind of unwind this, but I love your book choice because those principles are as true today as they were 30 years ago. And this is life-changing stuff, not just work help. It won't just help at work, but it helps with their whole lives. So I've just, the older you get, you'll see it as it happens. You look back on stuff, and some of the things you said, Jared, too, is, you weigh things and you're like, wait, that just doesn't work so good. I don't feel as good when I do that. And you get to the point where you just go, I ain't going to do it anymore. And that's where I am. So.
I love that. Speaks to strong boundaries and a lot of clarity about your philosophy of ambition.
Well,
And
I'm learning the hard way,
Yeah.
that the other way doesn't work as well. So I don't think it's, I just think we all learn through hard knocks sometimes. And once you do something enough times, you just choose to not do that anymore.
so true. I did not know that about you. You are such a multifaceted individual. It's so cool. I don't know if anybody saw this in the Slack channel, but I'm back in Montana right now, and I'm reading this book, and my mom was like, "Oh yeah, that guy came to Ad Club in the 90s." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And she was like, "Yeah, I met him in the 90s. Is he like a big deal? Why are you reading that book now?" And I was like, "Yeah, Mom, I'd say he's a big deal. I mean, he's one of like the best-selling business authors of all time, but that's so cool that you met him." But something that you said, Lori, that I think is so true, because I was saying this to Jared before we went live, that I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. I loved it. And I had to like start speed reading towards the end because I was reading it so slowly, because I just felt like there was so much to consume and so much to think about. And I was going back and rereading and doing the exercises. And after this, I feel like it's worth a reread, because it isn't business advice. It is how to lead a better, more wholehearted, more fulfilling life.
Yeah, and if I could share one more thing, the reason that I now say that I want to be the keeper of stories and the sharer of stories is because I have, I used to have a couple hundred business books, a lot of sales books, and there's a lot of older stuff that people haven't even heard about. And I'm not going to keep all my books. My goal now is to reread a couple of these books every month and write up a summary. And whether it's valuable for people to read, like this one would definitely be on that list. So, but there's a lot of good things that I hear people talking about, like it's a new concept, and a lot of good things just kind of come back over time, just like fashion.
They do. I really saw that firsthand last year, because we read Snap Selling and Gap Selling, because last year was all sales books, whereas this year is like personal and professional development books. And I read Jill Conrast's Snap Selling, and then the next month read Gap Selling. And I was like, oh, no knocks to Keenan, Gap Selling is great, but I was like, oh, this is like a drag and drop of Snap Selling with like a couple of rants about never demoing on the disco. But 12 years later, like people have forgotten Jill's wisdom, and it like
Yeah.
it, had to be refreshed and freshened up a little bit, or whatever it is. Yeah, there is nothing new except what has been forgotten. That is a great quote. Okay,
Leslie, quickly
please,
for a
please,
question for Lori, if you allow me.
please.
Lori, since you have kind of walked the path, a longer path, I would say, as you said, is there something that kind of stood out from this book, from your experience, that you probably go back and change it in time?
That I wouldn't change anything. But I think, what's most important when I look at the list, I'm looking at it right now, beginning with the end in mind, and seek first to understand and then to be understood. Like those stand the test of time. I mean, those are really, if you just did those two things, the world would be a different place if we all did that. So thank you for the question.
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
true. Neil, that's actually a perfect tee up to how I wanted to wrap this session anyways. And I know I kind of warned everybody at the beginning that we wouldn't get to the entire book because it's simply too good to cover it in 1 hour. And based on Stephen's advice that we really need to master habits 1, 2, and 3, those inward habits, those personal victories, before we can truly master those public victories, habits 4, 5, and 6. I thought it was a good place to start on 1, 2, or on 1, 2, and 3. The 4, 5, and 6, Lori just mentioned some of them. They are the ways in which we interact with the world, sort of thing. So seeking those win-win outcomes, active listening, which we covered last month in You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy, which is a great read if anybody hasn't read it yet, and creative cooperation. And since we don't have time to go deep into all of those, I did want to carry forward at least the piece on active listening, which Laura, you just brought up, that like seeking to understand piece and how important that is, and how if we just listen to understand instead of listen to reply, it could change the world. But I want to hear the one sort of thing in the book that really moved everybody, but I wanted to share this piece first, if you don't mind. We talked a lot last month in the book club about listening deeply with that goal of understanding, and how to resist the urge to interrupt or to interject with our own story, making it about us, or to be helpful and offer solutions at a time where maybe we don't understand enough to be helpful, or when the person just wants us to listen and not have to solve. But something Kate didn't talk about in that book was how using a technique to listen doesn't work, like how you have to be genuinely curious. And Stephen says, you cannot listen with technique alone. If I sense you're using some technique, I sense duplicity, I sense manipulation. I wonder why you're doing it, what your motives are, and I don't feel safe enough to open up to you. I thought that was just such a mic drop. So maybe, last question, Jared, for you before I ask everybody to drop their sharpen the saw habit into the chat. Like, when you can't use a technique to teach people how to listen, how do we grow this skill, or how do we train our teams to be better listeners?
What a powerful question. I don't know if I have the right answer here. I'm still learning.
I don't know, Lori, Ellie.
There's people in this room that are going to be far better than I at this.
Yeah,
I think
we
what-
got some
Yeah, Leslie,
geniuses here.
Or far more experienced than I. Yeah.
Yeah,
for
Ellie,
sure.
please.
Leslie, what you pulled out there about the feeling duplicitous if you're following some kind of format. Like, I do think if you lean into just being human, whatever version of that is for your person, if you just lean into that a little bit more and be genuine in yourself, then the listening comes out a lot more. If you start with your humanity and your empathy. If you're trying to follow a process, that's when it starts to feel like a process and not natural. So everybody
Right.
has to kind of take that listening, that curiosity, that beginner mindset in a slightly different way, whatever works for them, I think.
Mm.
But
Right.
shutting up first is probably like a good first step for everybody.
I think for
No,
me,
Yeah, please, Britta.
I was just going to say, I think for me, my listening style has changed completely when I've really learned that most of the time when I'm not listening, I'm just dysregulated. Like, we're going through so many, like, emotions are the data of how we move through the world as humans. And most of us are totally unaware of the fact that we're having emotions almost every single moment of the day. And my listening has really changed when I've been like, okay, I can feel the fear I can feel the fear physically happening in my chest. I'm just going to put my hand on my chest and like mentally say in my mind, like, you're safe. And then like, it brings me back to the conversation, it brings me back to focus, it brings me back. I can't even tell you how much this changed, like every interaction I've had in my entire life, like just changed everything.
Wow. Like the opposite of leaning into like anxiety or fear is being present. Powerful. And Ellie, I really appreciated your comments as well, because I have like some notes on the margin of the book where I'm kind of joking to myself that like truly the answer of this like technological world and AI that everybody is afraid of is going to take our jobs is this, I think this reaction that people deeply crave humanity. Like they crave people that are going to get on the phone and be authentic and maybe be quirky and do the things that robots would never do, or salespeople acting as robots would never do. So I think that is incredible. advice. Here in our last 2 minutes, team, I would love to hear from each of you. Habit 7 is renewal. The emphasis on self-care and self-growth being a process, right? I think, Jared, that's something you said at the very beginning of the show too, right? It's like continuous growth. We don't do it once and stop. We keep investing in ourselves. We keep growing our self-awareness. We keep becoming this best version of ourselves. When each of you thinks about sharpening the saw, what is one habit that you're going to take forward from today and really invest in, really help yourself become that next best version of you? And you can come off mute and share it or drop a comment, whatever works for you.
Yeah, if I may go right in the beginning, one thing that I've realized that, again, having grown up in this so-called corporates and gone through series of trainings and everything else, that makes you almost like an expert of doing multiple things. I kind of, with the passage of time, and especially since I'm kind of out of full-time work, and I just decided to allow myself to focus on one thing at a time, but I'm still struggling. So that is something that I want to really sharpen so that I can let go things. This is really, I'm struggling to let go something. If I see a great article on AI, I'll jump into it. The next time there is, generative AI, read that, then go back to read about some sales book and, make a podcast or whatever. We are human beings. I've screwed up a lot of relationship in my life. So I want to just be happy at this, second part of my journey, let's say, put it that way. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the struggle, it sounds like, of being like a multi-potentialite, a high input person, and then having to remind yourself that it's okay to just do one thing at a time. That's powerful. Thank you, Neil.
We're human beings,
yeah,
not
please.
human doings.
Yeah, some good comments in the chat as well. Be proactive. Whoa, what? I left my full-time job to go fractional today to shape my own destiny and stop having others shape it for me. Can we just pause to give Ellie some snaps?
Thank you. I wish I could snap. I'm just gonna like pretend I can over Zoom.
Ooh, that's
Congratulations.
incredible. Oh my gosh,
Thanks.
that is incredible.
Without
Wow.
much of a parachute. So putting in the positivity
Um,
out of the universe.
Yeah, and we have your back.
Thank
Drop
you.
it in Rev Room. We got your back.
I will.
And
Incredible.
it's super niche being a CS leader because everybody needs it, and there's not many fractional. It's all the salespeople to start that, so it's super cool.
Yeah, certainly not folks at your level.
Thank you.
No,
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I don't
That's
feel
incredible.
like and I hear you say that, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's no experience.
You're like, I got this. Okay. Oh my gosh, that is huge. I know Lori had to jump at hers with growth mindset, being a lifelong learner. I love that. Britta, acting against my instinct to be an island. Gosh, am I working on my delegation skills and embracing that too? That's a good share. Thank you so much. Mike, the constant reminder of taking a beginner's mindset approach. Oh, I love this one. It leads to renewal, it leads to sharpening the saw, it leads to finding better ways to move forward. I got accepted to the Small Business Administration Thrive program, and their only thing that they really asked us to do, because they were like, everybody's here is doing it. Like, to get into this, you have to have a business that's generating $250,000 minimum in revenue. Like, you're all successful business owners. But the one thing we ask you to do is show up with a beginner's mindset and show up reminding yourself that you don't know it all, so that you show up to learn, not to teach in this environment. I thought that was a powerful, bring it back, Neil, the paradigm shift. Like, I thought that was a good paradigm shift. Maren, focusing on being proactive right now as I step into a new role. Very exciting. Can't wait to hype you up in a few weeks on that. Mike, being open to different mindsets outside of your own. Yes, my favorite thing with Jared's community is that you can get new, oh yes, leaning into that, like the lived experiences of others, and remembering that every single person has something that they can teach us. Oh, super powerful stuff, folks. As always, I am deeply appreciative that you spent this hour with me. Thank you for bearing your soul a little bit, for sharing your insights. An extra special, everybody will welcome me. Hello, extra special thank you to Jared for being our guest this month. So thank you very much, Jared, and thanks to all
Thank you
of
for
you.
having me. You all are literally the best. If I could be helpful along the way, let me know.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you all. Have a great night. We'll see you next month.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Yes, Stevie.